Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Get It Growing, the gardening program of the Lafayette Parish Master Gardeners. My name is Janae Foley, and today we are delighted to have with us a fellow Master Gardener, Teresa Gore, and a hibiscus enthusiast. She and her husband, Mark, have the ribbons to show that they are great at growing the tropical hibiscus. And the bulk of our program is going to be spent talking about these glorious tropical hibiscuses that you see. But first, we want to talk about different varieties that are garden varieties that come back in your yard.
Yes. So many of them are planted directly in the soil in your garden and will return year after year. One of which is the Hibiscus acetosella, known as the red maple leaf. The flower is not as impressive as the leaves are. As you can see, the color and the shape is just beautiful. And this can grow to be a monster.
This is a large plant. We give you fair warning. It's a beautiful plant, but it's one of those that you're going to have to keep an eye on and keep it pruned.
Yes, or let it grow to 8 feet. The Hibiscus coccineus, as we all know, is the Texas 5-star. And it has such a beautiful red flower with the green webbing and very unusual leaves. You can identify that immediately just on the flower or the leaves. Also, the Hibiscus machutos, rose mallow. These are typically your dinner plates. People refer to them as dinner plate hibiscus. They can get up to 12 inches across, one bloom. The machutos as well as the butabilis.
This one is a named variety called Lord Baltimore. Makes a glorious show, but the same thing, be forewarned, it is a 6-foot by 6-foot plant.
You almost would want it freestanding, not in a garden bed.
Or definitely at the back of a border.
Yes. The Schizopetalus is known as a Japanese lantern, but frankly, I don't think anyone calls it that. I think everybody calls it a schizo. But you can see in the front here on Janae's left over here, the plant itself that's potted, how the flowers hang downward, and that kind of gives you the concept of a lantern.
And they are many varieties of these have different webbing and coloring, if you can pick up on that one. They're just variegated plants, but they do come back from the root.
Yes. All of the ones we're talking about here up front are garden variety. They're hardy. You'll have them year after year. The last one we'd like to mention of the garden variety is the Syriacus, commonly known as the Rose of Sharon. And a couple of these I cut yesterday because we had such rainstorms. I wasn't sure what we would have today that wouldn't be damaged. And the ones from yesterday, even though I put them in this vase, must be a little camera shy because they chose not to open. But these were cut this morning, so they're real pretty. You can see it has such a nice pink throat in there and very, very papery leaves as well as the foliage. And that leads us into our discussion of tropical hibiscus, which is the Rosa sinensis. And that is one way you can tell them apart is the foliage.
Right. It's got that, what would you call it, green tinge, as opposed to some of these have a gray-green tinge.
Yes, the garden variety hibiscus are very papery and thin, if you can notice up here on the front. And these two have serrated edges, which is you don't usually find or ever find in the tropicals. But you can see these are much thicker, more leathery, and some of the tropicals are very, very shiny. The leaves look as if they're wet. They're just such a shiny, beautiful green. You don't find that too much in the garden varieties.
No. And let's talk about the blooms and their fragrance.
As beautiful as all of these tropical hibiscus are, there is no fragrance. There is no fragrance. That is one thing that the hybridizers are working on, trying to put back into these lovely flowers is the fragrance.
And sooner or later, they will succeed. Now, we're going to briefly go over the growth requirements of these gorgeous plants, starting with the soil.
Yes, the tropical hibiscus require a very light, soilless mixture, actually. And if you can see, this is an example of the white perlite, which aids in drainage. And this is very finely ground pine bark. So it's just very light, very fluffy. You don't want to use a heavy mixture that will retain too much water. Hibiscus demand excellent drainage. And one way to ensure that is when you bring your pot home from the store, you traditionally don't put tropical hibiscus in the ground because they are an annual. They won't survive the winter. So we keep all of ours in pots, and this is just an example of a gallon pot, but I wanted specifically to show you the holes on the sides of the pot, not just the bottom, because if the holes are only on the bottom, when you water, the plant will sit in the water. So with holes on the sides, the water is able to escape that way. Now, because the black pots are traditionally what we use, it has been determined that soil in a black pot can reach 120 degrees on a sunny Sunday afternoon. So what has been suggested is to take a slightly larger empty pot, and we're assuming your plant is in this one, set it inside, and that will slightly cool the soil in the smaller pot.
And a lot of people use, too, the decorative pots. You can put one of these gorgeous plants in a decorative pot, and it accomplishes the same thing. If you want to, highlight your entrance or have a nice little touch on your patio.
Yes, that would be excellent because you could hide the dirty, ugly black plastic pot.
Exactly.
And cool it at the same time.
Now, and you want to elevate these pots too.
Yes, even if you have the side drainage holes, it is important to get a little airflow underneath the pot. You can use those fancy pot peat you can buy at the nurseries, or a couple of bricks work just fine.
Now, if you get a plant, let's briefly talk too about repotting the plant. If you get a plant from the nursery that's starting to be root bound, you want to immediately repot it.
Yes, and I would check any potted plant purchased, check it in the store before you even bring it home. If the roots have begun circling the base of the plant, it might not be worth your money.
You're looking for those nice white fibrous roots.
Yes, the fibrous roots. And by all means, repot when you get home in your very light soil mix.
And of course, they require special fertilizers.
It has been proven that hibiscus prefer a higher potassium, which on your fertilizers, it's usually prominently displayed, will be your third number. You have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Potassium, NPK, the K, is what the tropical hibiscus require for excellent blooming. So many of our other garden plants require a high middle number. So, and I would like to point out that you don't have to buy a fertilizer that has the word hibiscus on it. Nitrogen is nitrogen.
Right.
So this happens to say hibiscus, however. Look for that high third number. Now this one is a 10412.
And this was purchased locally too. You can find this product locally at garden centers.
Several nurseries carry the particular product I was just displaying. This was actually available at the Hibiscus Society show this previous month. And this is an 18-10-28, so very high phosphorus. And I do tend to fertilize once a week. I'll take a scoop of this in a traditional plastic garden watering can, stir it well to make sure it's dissolved, and pour it liberally on each pot. However, if the pot is dry, I always water first with plain water And then I'll water again with the fertilizer so as not to burn the roots.
And you keep excellent records too of all your fertilizer.
I do. That's anal, I guess. Now, this is a real nice bonus. And Janae, you can talk about, because you use this a lot in your garden.
Yes, it's not just for hibiscus. To generally green your plants, you can use Epsom salt, a tablespoon in a gallon, applied when you're watering. It just helps green up all your leaves, not just hibiscus leaves. So if they're getting that little, touch of lightness starting to fade out a little bit, try the Epsom salt treatment.
And I do the Epsom salts once a month.
Oh, that's more than one. And unfortunately, these are really fairly disease-resistant plants, but they do have a few problems.
It's actually impressive that the tropicals don't have the disease problems. You might, your yellow leaves, but you don't get the fungus and the bacterial infections like you do on other plants. So, but they do have their share of insect problems.
And you do just pluck off. You briefly mentioned the yellow leaf. You just pluck those off. They're just they've outlived their usefulness. They're not a sign of something drastic happening. Just pluck those little things off.
The plants don't get that large. We were talking about the maple leaf getting 8 feet and the Lord Baltimore taking over your patio. The tropical hibiscus don't get much larger than what you're looking at. And so for the roots to consistently generate leaves and blooms, they've got to get rid of some of the old ones.
Right.
So it's not unusual to have yellow leaves. However, if you have a stick in a pot with no leaves on it, then you have a problem.
But that's not going to happen because you're going to very methodically care for your plants.
Yes.
Let's get back to the insects. We got sidetracked.
Yes, particularly in the spring when you give your plants a first hearty dose of fertilizer, and that nitrogen kicks up so much of that tender new growth. It is just a magnet for aphids. And my first rule of defense is simply the sprayer from your garden hose. Line it up with your bud that has the insects on it, and just give it a good shot stream of water.
Holding the bud.
Holding the bud, so you don't spray the bud off the plant. You're just trying to dislodge the insects. Now that will work if you are consistent in inspecting your plants and not waiting until the infestation is so bad. This will be your only option. If you wait too long, you might as well cut off the bud. It's not going to bloom. And if it blooms, it will be distorted.
Right.
So your best bet is
if you have a few problems, if you have a few aphids, take care of them before you have 250 aphids on your plant, and then you have a problem.
Then you start trimming. But a good shot of water from your hose, something like an insecticidal soap, potassium acids, pyrethrin. You can the name doesn't really matter so much as the ingredients. And make sure that the insect you're trying to treat is listed on the product. Aphids and thrips are really the two common problems.
Right, as always, that's common good gardening practice. Follow the instructions on your label and make sure it's listed for the plant that you're applying it on. Now, it seems funny to be talking about watering a day after we had a deluge, but that is one of the prime rules to remember about these gorgeous tropical hibiscus.
They need water daily and sometimes twice a day.
Especially as our temperatures heat up. And what is this going to prevent?
Bud drop.
So many people call and say they've purchased this gorgeous plant, and the next thing they know, all of their buds are dropping off. And then you've got to wait for the plant to recycle again. Consistent watering, as Teresa's saying, sometimes, twice a day. Now I know you move your plants.
Yes, that is one benefit of having them in pots, is I can place them around the yard or on the patio, and if I see a particular plant, like the reds, for example, don't quite like as much sun, it's easy to pick up the pot and move it.
Right.
Let it have sun in the morning and a little more shade in the afternoon. But when the roots are stressed from lack of water, the roots immediately shut down, and they don't want to send water and minerals up to the buds. They're trying to maintain their own sanity, so they cut off nutrients and things to your flower buds, and this is what happens. They will turn yellow and they will fall off. So your best bet is to water every day. And in spite of the deluge yesterday, when you look at how thick some of the foliage is on some of these pots, it can rain all day. The only thing that's getting wet are the leaves. The soil's not getting watered. So even after a good rain, I think it's important to put your finger down in the pot.
And check on the water level. And I also noticed you have it mulched.
Oh, mulch is so important. And we have different types of mulch on display here today. This is a nice kind of a pine straw compost mix. Pine bark works. Pine straw is a little awkward in a small pot, but you could use pebbles. There are many different types of mulch you can use, which helps maintain the soil temperature. It helps prevent splashing when you water. You don't want the soil splashing back up onto your foliage.
And we do have to talk about winter care too. You know, we've discussed taking care of the plants in the summer. Now we're going to get them through the summer alive by constantly applying water after you've tested your soil moisture. And then we've got to take care of them when they're extremely temperature sensitive.
50 degrees maybe. I would bring all the pots into your garage or a barn. Does not necessarily have to be heated, but you don't want the pots to remain outside in your yard or on your patio. And it's a good time. January, I think, is when we do our major pruning. At least 1/3 of the plant is cut back to rejuvenate the roots. They will be slowing down. They will still be alive, so you have to continue to water and lightly fertilize throughout the winter. And maybe February, March, when our temperatures warm up and remain consistent, then you can move your pot back outside and give it a heavier dose of fertilizer. But while your potted tropical hibiscus are in your garage, you continue to water and fertilize. And by cutting off the top 1/3, you're putting less demand on your roots.
And also, you know, the plants are really not going to be at their prime at this time. You know, they're going to drop some leaves, but they will survive. And they're going to, when the weather starts getting warmer, sprout at different times. Don't worry, you know, if you've got 10 or 12 plants and only 3 start sprouting, don't immediately throw the other 7 away. Give them time, I mean, even into May and June to sprout out. Just like, you know, it's really the same gardening principles we talk about all the time. These are tropical plants. They love the warm weather, but they sometimes have to wait for the warm weather to respond and start growing. Now, let's talk a little bit about the cut flowers of hibiscus, because of course that's what we're really after, is the flowers.
This is such a small example of the cultivars available. You have singles, you have doubles, you have semi-doubles, every color of the rainbow. So many of these are grown that you purchase at local nurseries and at the Mike Bernard Hibiscus Society chapter right here in Lafayette.
And their show is in May. And you can get these tropical hibiscus at garden centers, but like the orchid show, they also have, you know, a special collection available at the show in May.
Yes, and that's where some of these came from. Some of these are grown from seed, hybridized by using your seed parent and your pollen parent and producing seed, growing the seedling. Of course, it takes months and months to do that, years. But some of these have been grown from seed.
And I do notice you don't have any of these in water.
No, isn't that wonderful? Actually, probably half of these blooms you're looking at were cut from their shrubs yesterday.
And refrigerated.
They were refrigerated and then brought out this morning to allow them to warm. and the other half were cut right before we came to the show today.
And they are going to die at the end of the day. You know, there's nothing you can do. They're just like a daily, one day of bloom, the exception being if you pick that bud and refrigerate it. So as gorgeous as they are, enjoy them for the day.
They last a day. Some species, some cultivars will last more than a day on the plant itself. But these have been out of water for 24 hours. And you can see how beautiful they are.
They're gorgeous.
And some of the unusual colors, of course, we all love the Stolen Kiss right in front of Janae. That is smaller than it can get. I have seen 8-9 inch bloom on that flower. Something exotic. Janae, this is one of your personal favorites.
The Dancing Fire. That's as gorgeous, and one of the few that I know the name to. All of these individual plants have names. They've been given a cultivar name, and Teresa's going to run through a few more of them as we have time.
What I'd like to point out is a color such as this one is relatively new on the market. You don't normally see brown flowers, and not everyone likes brown flowers. This is supposed to be brown. And this lovely Cajun blue, if you can see that, is just gorgeous. And here we have the magenta, rosy,
Dusty rose
color. Actually, its name is Bayou Rose. And Heartbeat, nice reds. Going Steady is such a lovely bloom right here in the front, and I think it's appropriately named because at any one point there'll be 6 of these flowers on a plant this size, and there'll be 6 more the next day. So Going Steady is correct. It is go steady when it flowers.
Now this is Going Steady right up here too.
Yes, we brought, actually those are all from one plant. So there are many choices, any color you can imagine. Any color combinations. They're just
and many more. I think in the next coming years we're going to see more from breeders that are releasing some stock with even more exciting colors and combinations, if that's believable. But I think you're going to see an influx into garden centers of even more dramatically colored hibiscus, if you can, tropical hibiscus, if you can believe that. We do too want to point out the grafted varieties, the strength of the grafted varieties.
Yes, we had talked about some of these were grown from seed by cross-pollinating 2 cultivars. Some of these may have been grown from softwood cuttings, and some of these are actually grafted plants. Pride of Hankins, now this is a yesterday bloom, so it's not as pretty as it normally is, but is a very hardy plant, disease resistant, consistent in its blooming, and it is used as rootstock for a lot of the hibiscus that you will purchase at the local stores.
It gives them strength and vigor because it's such a vigorous plant itself. We want to encourage, we rapidly run through a list of do's and don'ts for these plants. The Acadiana Hibiscus Society, the Mark Bernard chapter, meets the first Tuesday of every month at the Ira Nelson Horticulture Center. They will not be meeting in August. Unfortunately, you'll have to wait until September. If you have more questions on hibiscus, they're an excellent reference group. They will be glad to answer any questions that you have. We're going to run over again the basic principles. If you want someone to remember one thing about growing these plants, it's
consistent watering.
Water, 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 and then water, water again.
Yes. Do not wait until your leaves are wilted. At that point, you have done damage to your roots.
And because you've got the drainage holes on the side, because you've got them elevated, you're going to have your applying water, but you don't want water to be staying on the roots either. You want it to be flowing through that plant.
Yes, and that is a good point. Also with the light soil that we mentioned earlier. If you have a heavy bagged soil, it will retain too much water, will fill the oxygen pockets that should be available to the roots.
So you can amend it with your perlite
Yes,
or vermiculite or pine bark fines.
yes, just to give better airflow to your roots.
We thank you so much for being here today with us, Teresa. We hope we've answered all of your questions. You know, these are just wonderful, wonderful, glorious plants for color in your tropical garden, on your patio, and in your yard. Remember that they are tropical plants, though. They will not survive our winters.
Thank you.